Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cow, and this is the Cameron Journal Newshour. Oh my goodness, I am coming to you from the very snowy, very blizzardy, very snowy, cold, windy New England, central New England. Southern New England's getting a little bit crazier. I'm in Connecticut, but I am a couple hours inland. The coast is really getting hit much harder. In the great blizzard that is, supposed to be as bad as it was in 1978. I think the part I'm worried about the most is we have more snow coming on Wednesday. The snow from the last big storm hadn't even hardly melted yet. We now have another probably 12 inches a foot to maybe 18 on top of it, judging by my car, that managed to drift the snow against my car, but not off of my car. Funny how that works. And it's yeah. So the yard is just getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and so it's yeah. And we were just kind of getting towards like a melty mud situation because after the last storm it snowed and then was cold for 2-3 weeks. No melting. We were just finally get melting, more snow on top. The only nice thing is this time we are staying in snow melting temperatures. We're not going back into the deep freeze once this storm passes. So that's good. They're digging out in New York City. They're digging in Boston. They're digging in DC. They're even digging in Delaware. If I were at home, I would also be in the snow. So that's it's a lot of fun. We very rarely do much weather here. But yeah, since this one affects me personally, we'll talk about it. Anyway, so hello from the snowy north. I don't know why my under eyes are so bright. Good lord. That is Oh, that's better. Oh my goodness. It was kind of like my cheeks were just kind of like woohoo. Shiny, shiny. I think my camera might there that's much better. Yeah, there we go. The exposure was a little high. Um that's so much better. I want to remind everyone I that we are getting into spring and whatnot, and I am here over the next couple of weeks, starting to roll out more and more perks for my Cameron Journal Plus members. So if you've not joined Cameron Journal Plus or become a monthly subscriber on Substack, you'll want to do that. There's two places: CameronJournal.com/subscribe and CameronJournal.substack.com. When you join, what do you get? I have a list. One, I'm working on an ad-free version of my Saturday newsletter because I have started taking ads, and I'm going to work on an ad-free version of that for members only. I'm also starting a new series of salons, conversations with the best of the Cameron Journal podcast, putting together some panel shows and this sort of thing, so that we can have some interesting Q&A questions, this type of thing. They will be recorded, but I'd also like to get people to show up. Salons will be a small fee for non-members, but guess who they'll be free for? Cameron Journal Plus subscribers. Excuse me. There's also discounts on services if you are a writer and you've been thinking about doing the Power of Story writing courses or things like that. There's discounts for being a Cameron Journal Plus subscriber. Also, you also get access to the Discord and some discounts and hangouts with me. Speaking of discounts and hangouts with me, tomorrow night, my annual tradition of streaming and commentating on the State of the Union speech with the President of the United States is back again this year. I will 110% be doing that stream. It'll be tomorrow night, beginning at 8 o'clock. Right here, if you're watching now, it'll be the same location. If you ever miss a channel and want to change channels, CameronJournal.com/newshour. That is the place to find all of that stuff. It will be streaming at 8 o'clock. I think the speech starts at 9. I probably should get clearer on that. It might start at 8. Let's find out, actually. Because I have the stream set uh, um, for 8 o'clock already. And so we want to make sure that it should be... C-SPAN coverage is starting at 6. So, yeah, I think the speech starts at 9. So it's so we'll start our stream at 8 and then just go right into the speech. Let's see. Cuz I think it starts at 9. I had looked it up when I did it and said, "Oh, we usually start at 8 o'clock." Yeah, it's at 9. That's what I thought. So what usually happens is we start at 8 o'clock, we watch commentary, we talk, we chat, we get a snack, because this is a very fluid, it's not a formal show. We hang out, we talk. It's like an election night. We hang out, we talk, we kiki, we do this and that, all this sort of thing. And then the speech starts at 9 and I'll do commentary. I'll walk you through the whole process in terms of who's what, who's there, who's why, the whole story, what all the symbols mean, all this type of thing. So look at it as watching the State of the Union with a really smart friend. And then we'll watch the speech, we'll watch the response, and go from there. It's a long night. I will remind everyone. So the speech is usually 90 minutes. There's a lot of clapping and applauding, usually. There's sometimes booing and things like that. And so, there, it's a long, and then the response at the end of the speech, there's usually a break of 5-10 minutes, and then they immediately air the response, and that's about 20 minutes or so. So we don't end up getting the stream done till 11:30 midnight sometimes. Very late here in the East. So so that'll be tomorrow night. I do remind everyone that you would have known all this information if you were on the Cameron Journal newsletter, which is cameronjournal.substack.com or cameronjournal.com/newsletter. You can sign up for that and get all of this delivered to your inbox, including videos from the week, the living joke, all this kind of thing. So, lots of coughing tonight. I think it's just the weather and whatnot. When the air pressure falls rapidly, my lungs are kind of like, we don't like this. But caffeine helps. All right, I think that's all the housekeeping stuff. Let's dive into the headlines. So let me do this, and let me get rid of that, and get rid of that, and we're going to change that, because that was for the living joke. And we're going to dive right into our first story, which is we're no longer attracting top talent. The brain drain that is killing American science. So, and let me get us a little text overlay here. So one of the things that happens, unfortunately, a lot is we get into one of the things that happens when regimes become unfriendly, and they're and we have differing people have issues with things that are being said, things that are being done, funding isn't happening, all this sort of thing, is that people tend to go where they're actually kind of wanted and needed and required, and oftentimes they end up going where funding is, in a way that historically, since World War II, the United States has always been the number one destination. Best companies, deep capital markets, tons of research funding, best universities, all this type of thing. And a lot of regimes do this in Iran, Russia, all this type of thing. One of the first people to leave are extremely sophisticated technicians, extremely sophisticated scientists, because they need money to do their work, and they're very in demand pretty much everywhere else in the world. And I never thought in my lifetime that we would be seeing brain drain happen here in the United States, simply because we've always been a top number one destination since 1945, and I never thought that would ever change. Well, that has now changed, and we are suffering one of the first earliest symptoms of democratic systems and freedom beginning to go away. And the first sign you look for in any country that's in trouble is brain drain. And it's now come to the United States. So, and this is obviously the result in major slashes in science funding. It says, as Trump slashes science funding, young researchers flee abroad. Without solid innovation, the U.S. could cease to have the largest biomedical ecosystem in the world. In April 2025, less than 3 months after Donald Trump returned to the White House, the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention put out its latest public health alert on so-called superbugs, strains of bacteria resistant to antibiotics. These drug-resistant germs, the CDC warned, are responsible for more than 3 million infections in the U.S. each year, claiming lives up to 48,000 Americans. It's about the number of people that die in car accidents. Globally, the largely untreatable pathogens contribute annually to almost 5 million deaths, and health experts fear that unless urgent steps are taken, they could become a leading killer, surpassing even cancer by 2050. We're in a war against bacteria, said Ian Morgan, a postdoctoral fellow at the U.S. National Institutes of Health, the world's largest funder of biomedical research. He's on the front lines of that war against superbugs. The NIH lab in which he works is driving what he described as high-risk, high-reward research. But over the past year, the battlefield has toughened. Under the Trump administration, Morgan, 33, and thousands of other young American scientists like him have grappled with wave after wave of disruptions. Billions of dollars have been wiped from research budgets. Almost 8,000 grants have been canceled at NIH, and the U.S. National Science Foundation alone and more than 1,000 NIH employees have been fired. Morgan's research has been rattled by multi-billion-dollar cuts in NIH contracts that make it impossible for labs to maintain their equipment. They have the choice of paying exorbitant maintenance fees or giving up on experiments. Amid the maelstrom, young and early career scientists like Morgan are among the hardest hit. His own future is now in doubt. In the normal trajectory of a life in science, Morgan will be planning to set up his own laboratory conducting groundbreaking research designed to win the war on superbugs. But with the ongoing hiring freeze at NIH, his options are limited. Quote, right now there's no way to even apply to start your own lab at NIH, no matter how good you are or how critical your work, he says. Morgan's predicament has led him to step up as a steward at a new union for young NIH researchers formed under the umbrella of the UAW. Its almost 5,000 members are organizing against the Trump administration's assault on American science. The chaos that has descended on NIH over the past year has led Morgan to fear for his future, the future of his craft, and ultimately the fight against superbugs. Quote, we're making progress. We have a lot of really cool new innovations that could defeat the infections, he said, but if we stop doing the work, we lose the war. A similar story to Morgan's could be told by tens of thousands of other young scientists throughout NIH and across numerous U.S. universities experiencing federal funding squeezes. More than 10,000 postdoctoral experts in scientific and related fields were lost to the federal workforce last year, according to Science. That's the magazine. The magazine looked at 14 research agencies, including NIH, and found that the number of employees departing outstripped new hires by 11 to 1. The brain drain is prompting existential fears that American science, a powerhouse of the U.S. economy and of global public health, is being deprived of its lifeblood. The source of young researchers, the next generation of scientists who are the font of new ideas and innovation, is being throttled. And quote, the talent pool is developed by letting young people flourish among like-minded, excited scientists, said John Presna, a pediatric brain cancer doctor who leads a research laboratory at the University of Michigan. If that ceases, then that intellectual discovery, that drive to make the next great insight into cancer, are the challenges we planted in another country's soil. The NIH drives scientific progress globally across biomedical and behavioral sciences, including defenses against infectious diseases and possible future pandemics. It pushes at the frontier of new therapies geared to the genetic makeup of individual patients and can claim numerous breakthroughs in cancer treatment, vaccinations, and much more. Without the NIH driving innovation at its core, the U.S. would cease to have the largest biomedical system in the world. Emma Bay Dickinson, a 27-year-old postgrad researcher in infectious diseases, is a specialist in Zika, the largely mosquito-borne virus that can cause birth defects. Her longer-term ambition is to help find a way to protect the world against viruses that have the potential to evolve into the next pandemic, such as avian flu. For now, though, the U.S. will miss out on her skills. The Trump administration's funding cuts began to hit last year just when, as a postgraduate research fellow at NIH in Washington, D.C., she was hunting for her next position. Quote, my classmates in applying in the U.S. were getting rejected and were being told that funding cuts meant there was too much uncertainty to offer them jobs. Dickinson, who is queer, was discouraged by Trump's animus against diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was used as a justification for many of the grant cuts. She was also dismayed by the blatant censorship imposed by the administration. Applicants for federal funding were forced to filter their proposals to remove a banned list of keywords across DEI, climate, vaccines, and other study areas deemed undesirable by Trump. So Dickinson redirected her energies abroad. She began applying for posts in Spain and Germany, and in the end landing a spot at a prestigious program at a Barcelona infectious disease research institution. For the foreseeable future, she sees her future in Europe. It's important for me to feel I can be by myself in my science. That's just not possible now in the U.S. She's not alone. A growing number of young American scientists are quitting the country for positions in Europe, Australia, or Asia. Universities across Europe have been swift to exploit the opportunity, openly enticing young Americans to join the Exodus and seek scientific asylum with them. The response has been overwhelming. Ademase University, which has launched one of the first European programs to lure people from the U.S., was inundated by hundreds of applications from early career researchers hoping to flee the U.S. The outflow of young scientists has been exacerbated by deep cuts to NIH training programs, which acts as a breeding ground for the U.S.'s future top scientists. At least 50 training programs targeted at undergraduates through early career lab researchers have been shut down under the Trump administration. As an NIH program officer spoke to The Guardian about the impact of the training cuts, but asked not to be named for fear of reprisal. Quote, trainees are the most vulnerable people in science, the officer said. They are the ones with the new ideas where a lot of our hope resides. Now they're losing their minds and worry about what comes next. They're desperate for advice on how to stay in science when there are no grants available. The officer added, if you delay and terminate training grants, it's like a snowball effect. Eventually you start wiping out our next generation of scientists. Adding to the problem of young talent leaving the country, the flow of early career researchers entering U.S. scientific labs from around the world is also shrinking as a result of Trump's immigration crackdown. Scientists from abroad are often at the forefront of U.S. innovation. Last year, half of the U.S.'s Nobel Prize winners in science subjects were immigrants. In September, Trump imposed a $100,000 fee on new applications for H-1B visas for foreign skilled workers, a move that makes coming to the U.S. prohibitively expensive for most researchers. Then in January, the administration suspended immigrant visa processing to people from 75 countries. Add to that the nightly TV images beamed around the world of ICE raids on U.S. city streets, and a clear message has been sent out that America does not welcome newcomers. Jennifer Jones, director for the Centers of Science and Democracy at the Union of Concerned Scientists, said that the international reputation of U.S. science has been damaged in ways that could take years to repair. Quote, we are no longer attracting top talent from around the world. Why would you want to come to a place where you know you could be threatened with deportation at any moment? And so it goes. This is when a lot of the times when a new regime comes in and begins a censorship regime or begins to attack scientists, institutions, and different people, they respond simply by leaving. These people are in demand. And there's a lot of opportunity elsewhere in the world for them. And so it's this is a classic, a really classic sign. We saw this after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. There was mass exodus from both countries to elsewhere in the world. This is the downstream effect of these policies that very rarely gets talked about and very rarely is made a priority by the regular person and the regular voter. If you wanted to restrict immigration in order to hire American scientists, that's one thing. We're doing neither. We're both, and because the point is, the whole point of this is pandemic backlash. Fauci came from NIH. It was, public health and scientists who were the people guiding the pandemic, especially post 2020 election with Biden, that, recommend, mandatory masking, mandatory vaxxing, all this type of thing, even though there are, and I have documented severe questions about the COVID vaccine, so much so I do not take it. And I know many of my friends who are the same, and we were all people that were once on board. this is retribution. Unfortunately, it's shooting our own selves in the foot, because the reality is, demographically speaking, the boomers were a very large generation. The millennials were a large generation. Gen X, which was in between those two, was a very small generation. Gen Z also was a very small generation. Gen Alpha will probably be smaller because a lot of millennials didn't have kids. And those that are having fewer because they started older. The once these people leave, once these training programs are gone, once these scientists don't get trained, that no longer exists. And there won't be any opportunity to get them back, or to recreate the trainee, or to train the trainees that were never there. To, I mean, demographically speaking, we're looking at population contraction by the end of the next decade. And letting these people go now basically means we're losing decades of potential science. This is a problem that will not be able to be fixed for 20 to 30 years at most. The hope is that perhaps when Alpha hits college and postdoc in a decade or so, you could start that process. But it's not, the reality is, it's not going to be easy to get these things refunded, to get the money going again, to get the programs, the science, the expertise, all this type of thing. And it's going to be tenuous at first. Certainly attracting talent from abroad is going to be very difficult for quite some time. And so the reality is, you end up falling behind. Now, obviously, this is about the NIH and about biomedical research. This isn't about every single thing or every single scientific pathway. This article is very focused, but we've known since this time last year that European universities have thrown open the doors to anyone who wants to leave. I have I heard a phrase on CBS this morning that I never thought I would hear. And that was an American scientist working in exile in Canada. I never thought in my life I would hear that phrase used. And the reality is, our best minds, our best people are just spreading out all over the globe. Now, as far as humanity in the globe's concerned, this is amazing because it will spread American science and ideas and all this type of thing all around the world. It will get new innovations happening. It will get new drugs happening in other places, other countries, other expertise that may be more collaborative or even more, owned by not big pharma, all this type of thing. There'll be some upsides to this. But as a country, we're not, it will be very soon, we may not be in the lead on these things. And I'm going to go into a bit of conjecture here to say, my guess is if we started looking around at some of the other areas of science and some other industries, my guess is probably on a smaller scale, because less government dependent things will be less affected by all of this. My guess is there's a pattern a little bit everywhere around this, and there's probably a lot of people who are looking for friendlier shores. Certainly immigrants are looking elsewhere. Whether Americans start to leave in any significant number would also be interesting. I know, because I hang out in digital nomad and and expat communities, that the number of people looking to move abroad has increased a great deal. I've seen probably a dozen people get the hell out. If they're emblematic of people who never thought they would leave but have already kind of bailed, that is that's not insignificant. I know there's been a lot of new questions. There's a subreddit called AmerExit where people are coordinating strategies to leave. I know that inquiries about leaving have gone up in pretty much everywhere. So it's a very interesting situation. My European friends are always asking me, "When are you leaving? When are you leaving?" And I'm kind of like, well, a lot of what I do depends on being here in America, so hopefully not anytime soon. Hopefully I can ride it out. But it's this whole experience is going to leave us poorer as a country, and that was kind of the point of this story. All right, let's move on because I spent a lot of time on that. So this next story, I think, is rather hilarious. And that oh, we have some comments. Sorry, commenters, I didn't see you. Oh, Lacrissa Huckabee. Yes, that's my cousin. Hello, hi. Thank you for watching. Um and hi, hello everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Um this next story is quite entertaining. Because as it turns out, Nixon had a point in his paranoia. So in a new article from the New York Times, 7 pages of a sealed Watergate file set undiscovered until now. And it says here Nixon had conclusive proof that the Joint Chiefs of Staff systematically spied on him and attempted to undermine him as part of a right wing plot against his government. If he had publicized this world historic scandal during Watergate, he might have actually rallied enough support with the public to save his presidency. His paranoia and sense of being under constant siege was much mocked at the time. But these revelations show that he actually had good reason to feel this way. But rather than publicize his extraordinary scandal, Nixon decided to go to his grave with the secret, solely to protect the honor and integrity of the U.S. Armed Forces and America's international reputation for democracy during the Cold War. We are only learning about it now, 32 years after his death. That still doesn't get you out of the fact that you broke into the Watergate Hotel and stole Democratic stuff and was bad at it. And then people, Roger Stone of all people. Now, Roger Stone used the Watergate scandal as a job application. He loves Richard Nixon, has a face of Richard Nixon tattoo on his back, by the way. So no surprise that he put it all in his book. And so, I think, for better or for worse, Nixon is a very misunderstood president. This was the man that opened China. This is the man that thought universal health care was a good idea, couldn't get it through Congress, went with the HMO instead because he thought it would get people health care faster. He unleashed a monster, but there you go. He did not think he could win in 72 against McGovern. And wanted to spy on the Democratic Party. A lot of the reason we have the right-wing media ecosystem we do today is because of Nixon. Roger Stone, this guy right here, and as well as the Roger Ailes, the guy who went on to create Fox News, they viewed what the media did to Nixon as the liberal media, mostly television, so ABC, CBS, NBC, Washington Post, New York Times, did not like Nixon, were dead set against him, and used Watergate and Vietnam, quite frankly, to destroy Nixon's presidency. Bearing in mind, Nixon wins by a fair margin in 68. He wins by a much better margin in 72. Vietnam gets defunded in 73. Nixon resigns in 74. And so they viewed it as the liberal media destroyed the Nixon presidency, and they were never going to forgive them for that. And most importantly, and Roger Stone has said this, the media should never be able to do that to a president ever again. And so Roger Stone and Roger Ailes went away. And they studied, they worked, they made connections, all this type of thing. When cable comes along, Roger Ailes was on it like hot, like white on rice, and goes and eventually and works for MSNBC, and then eventually creates Fox News. Tangentially connected, but not really to these two individuals particularly, but the use of AM radio to create the first, conservative right-wing mass broadcasting media programs happens in the early 80s when FM was invented. All the music and pop stations move over to FM, and it was what are we going to do with AM? And there were people who started buying up those stations for pennies on the dollar, and right-wing conservative programming was born. Bearing in mind, Rush Limbaugh begins broadcasting in 1988. About the time I was born, actually. Fun fact. And then that spawns everybody. Michael Medved, Michael Savage, Laura Ingraham, who was on radio before she was on TV. Hugh Hewitt, who now does some TV but never really has. Sean Hannity, who is on both TV and radio, all this type of thing. All because of what the media did to Nixon. by exposing him for being knowledgeable, lying about, and covering up the spying of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel in D.C. And I do laugh that his paranoia did have some validity. I would, if you want to go read the whole, I'm not going to go get into the whole thing right now, but if you want to read the whole thing, please feel free to check out the whole article about the Joint Chiefs of Staff and what they were doing. His paranoia was not uncalled for, which I think is rather entertaining. Because we always think of him as being very as being, very paranoid at the end and very stressed and all this type of thing. And as it turns out, it wasn't without cause, and he just decided to keep it quiet. So, I do laugh about the fact that that the rehabbing of a lot of these figures has been quite interesting in terms of, in the Trump era, we have relooked at the Bush administration and decided, it was not so bad. Right now, we're going so far back. The Nixon administration is getting a makeover, and that is a quite a quite interesting thing. Unfortunately, this is a very this happens to presidencies, and people, all the comment section is as tawdry as hell, because there's lots of, it was the CIA, he knew it, he knew who killed JFK, and it was all a CIA op. Very sloppy for a CIA op, and that's not what Haldeman said, but never mind, all this other thing. This happens to presidencies. Decades after the presidency is over, the term has ended. In many cases, the man who held the office has died. Stuff starts to come out. Documents get unsealed. Things come out. New information comes to light. That happens all the time. We especially once the Cold War was over, a lot of stuff that remained classified from the Truman years, the Eisenhower years, all this type of thing, and even Condoleezza Rice talks about this. As a lot of that stuff got unclassified and unsealed, you find just amazing decisions setting up for the success in the Cold War made in the very earliest days by people who were operating without a playbook, without anything, and were just making calls, and they happen to be the right ones. I think Nixon is underestimated as a president, but we also have to forget this man was also the one that bombed Laos and Cambodia with unauthorized by Congress. This is a man who was responsible for the death of tens of thousands on both sides, in a war we really had no business being in. And Nixon was Nixon was a lot of things, but it was funny that his paranoia was eventually proven right. So, wow, we're not going through news stories very fast tonight. We are 45 minutes in and we've covered a couple things. This one, I actually need to go and get this in my news app. This one I think was interesting. So, The Atlantic has a really great article. The great crime decline is happening all across the country. Now, if you listen to people online and all this type of thing, you would think crime is still a terrible, terrible issue. And we are just dying under all of this crime that we just can't seem to shift or get rid of. When the reality is crime has been on the decline since 1991, and it continues to go down. The article begins. We're not going to read this whole thing. Last summer, a protester in Seattle made an anti-police sign with an unusual message. Hey, SPD, it read, crime is down 20%. You had nothing to do with it. The taunt was glib, but it hinted at a profound question about the nature of public safety in American cities. After a pandemic-era rise in murders and commonly attributed to a lack of policing, Seattle recorded fewer homicides in 2025 than in 2019, despite a much smaller police force. If less policing made crime go up following the George Floyd protests, and most people thought it did, then what made it go down? What happened in Seattle is happening even more dramatically across the country as America experiences a once-in-a-lifetime improvement in public safety despite a police staffing crisis. In August, the FBI released its final data for 2024, which showed that America's violent crime rate fell to the lowest level since 1969, led by a nearly 15% decrease in homicides, the steepest annual drop ever recorded. Preliminarily, 2025 numbers look even better. The crime analyst of Jeff Asher has concluded that the national murder rate through October 2025 fell by almost 20%, and all other major crimes declined as well. The post-pandemic crime wave has receded, and then some. According to Asher's analysis, Detroit, San Francisco, Chicago, Newark, and a handful of other big cities recorded their lowest murder rates since the 1950s and 60s. Our cities are as safe as they've ever been in the history of the country, Patrick Sharkey, a sociologist at Princeton who studies urban violence, told me. Few experts endorse the idea that the police had nothing to do with it, as a Seattle protester claimed. But the link between the number of cops and the number of crimes seems hazier than ever. The low point in violent crime has arrived even though large police departments employed 6% fewer officers going into 2025 than they did at the beginning of 2020, according to a survey by the Police Executive Research Forum. Though they were mostly not in fact defunded, police forces were rocked by retirements and departures. New Orleans lost nearly a quarter of its officers in the years after the pandemic, and then recorded its lowest homicide rate since the 1970s in 2025. Philadelphia had its lowest per capita police staffing since 1985, and just clocked its lowest murder rate since 1966. There are many plausible explanations for the recent crime downturn. Sharper policing strategy, more police overtime, low unemployment, the lure of digital life, the post-pandemic return to normalcy. Each of these surely played a role, but only one theory can match the decline in its scope and scale, that the massive post-pandemic investment in local governments deployed during the Biden administration, particularly through the American Rescue Plan Act, delivered a huge boost to the infrastructure and services of American communities, including those that suffered most from violent crime. That spending may be responsible for our current Pax Urbana. That's a play on Pax Romana. Basically means Roman peace, things being at peace. Naturally, every local leader likes to say that their police department is making the difference, but in this case, every happy family is not alike. Police staffing and strategy may vary widely from place to place, so an exceptional local police chief can hardly explain gains that are so widespread. What has changed nationally is a huge investment by the federal government in prevention in response to the COVID epidemic. John Roman, a criminal justice researcher who heads NORC's Center on Public Safety and Justice at the University of Chicago, told me. He credits ARPA with sending billions to local governments to use as they saw fit, and defines prevention in the broadest possible sense, investing in education, police, librarians, community centers, social workers, local nonprofits, local government employment roles increased almost perfectly inverse to the crime rate. One of the most impressive turnarounds has occurred in Baltimore. Now, this one I've heard about before, which has cut homicides by almost 60% in the past 5 years, bringing the murder rate close to a 50-year low. That comes despite a historically understaffed Baltimore Police Department. In our heyday, we had 3,100 police officers, and in 2015, we had 3,000. Now we have 2,080, the city's police commissioner, Richard Worley, told me. We're still 500 officers short of where we're supposed to be. Mayor Brandon Scott, who has presided over the decline in violence, praises the police, but notes that police alone can be neither credited nor blamed for the crime trends. The difference of approach here is I do not, and the city does not subscribe to the thinking that only the women and men of the Baltimore Police Department are responsible for reducing violence in our city, he told me. City leaders and observers alike have celebrated Baltimore's new mayor's Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, which received $37 million in ARPA money from the city and works with police, schools, hospitals, and nonprofits. ARPA allowed Mayor Scott to build out a brand new agency that didn't exist before. Stephanie Mavronis, who directs the office, told me, we knew it was a one-time investment and we had to demonstrate to the Baltimore public that we should be funding this. Mavronis' office supervises the city's group violence reduction strategy, which conducts direct outreach to a narrow band of people caught in the cycle of retaliatory killings. People it identifies as likely to perpetuate crimes receive letters from Mayor Scott offering access to city services. He has sent 450 of these custom notifications, and 336 people have taken him up on the offer. My colleague Tulus Olaranapa wrote about this program in September. A University of Pennsylvania study credited GVRS with reducing homicides and non-fatal shootings in the city's dangerous Western District by a quarter. That approach is one of the scores of alternative public safety ideas that were funded through ARPA. Cook County, home of Chicago and the nation's second largest county, put roughly $36 million into efforts such as Healing Hurt People Chicago, a trauma recovery program for crime victims. Mecklenburg County, home of Charlotte, North Carolina, used ARPA to fund a youth peace summit and advertise a gun lock distribution program. Some ARPA money also bolstered police and sheriff's departments directly. All that funding combined now represents just a small slice of the local government stimulus delivered through the bill. According to a National League of Cities database that covers $65 billion in local ARPA grants to 19,000 projects, public safety made up less than 9% of the investment, less money than was spent on traditional public health, housing, infrastructure, community aid, or government operations. And it goes through more numbers. It goes on for a while. I would encourage you to go read it. My point of bringing this up is that we managed to cause a huge post-pandemic decline in crime, and the best part about it is that it shows when you invest in communities, that works. It proves the thesis that the best crime prevention is helping people really where there are, helping them access services, fix things in their life, and get them going in a different direction. And as it turns out, you can have fewer officers, less policing, and better public safety when you give people less incentives to commit crime. And we've known this for a long time. The Biden administration took action upon that. I don't know why they didn't talk about that during the election more. They should have, among other things. But this is a quite remarkable thing. It's certainly more helpful and better than rounding people up in detention centers. Now, moving on quickly, we're going to dive into a little bit of Gaza news. Some of these stories will go quickly now, and we'll get through them all. So this one is the Human Rights Council finding Israel responsible for war crimes. Not that anyone will particularly care, but I felt like this deserves some airtime.
In relation to Israel's military operations and attacks in Gaza from 7th October, we conclude that Israeli authorities are responsible for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and violations of international humanitarian and human rights law, including extermination, intentionally directing attacks against civilians and civilian objects, murder or willful killing, using starvation as a method of war, forcible transfer, gender persecution targeting Palestinian men and boys, sexual and gender-based violence amounting to torture, and cruel or inhuman treatment. Israel's total siege of the Gaza Strip has weaponized the provision of life-sustaining necessities for strategic and political gains, including through cutting off supplies of water, food, electricity, fuel, and other essential supplies, including humanitarian assistance. It constitutes collective punishment, disproportionately impacting pregnant women and persons with disabilities, and is causing grave harm to children, including starvation-related deaths.
The cruelty is the point, by the way. We don't need to listen to the last 50 seconds of that. The cruelty is the point. The cruelty is the point. Now, and I've set this up specifically to start with the horrors of Gaza, and Israel will respond. And they will say, we are doing this for our own security. It's full of Hamas. Our people are being attacked. Israelis are being killed. This is a terrible thing. At which point, I would then turn around and remind Israel of this video. And this did not get as much press as it should have, but it really should have gotten a lot more. It's very short. We'll watch.
The Israeli Prime Minister came here today and said that Israel is surrounded by those who want to destroy it, an enemy. We're here, members of a Muslim Arab committee mandated by 57 Arab and Muslim countries. And I can tell you here, very unequivocally, all of us are willing to, right now, guarantee the security of Israel in the context of Israel ending the occupation and allowing for the emergence of a Palestinian state, independent state. He is creating that danger because he simply does not want the two-state solution. Can you ask the Israeli officials what is their end game? Other than just wars and wars and wars, ask any Israeli official what is their plan for peace. You'll get nothing because they're only thinking of the first step. We're going to go destroy Gaza, inflame the West Bank, destroy Lebanon. The Israeli Prime Minister came here today and said that Israel is...
The cruelty is the point. The cruelty is the point. The cruelty is the point. And we see it again and again and again. The cruelty is the point. I have to say, behind Kurds, Chechens, and a handful of others, being born Palestinian is a unique burden I would never want to bear. And I'm African American. Our history is not exactly glowing. And I want to reinforce that the cruelty is the point. I'm not going to linger on this story very long because I'm late and I started late, and we have, as you can tell, a lot of tabs to go through. Fortunately, we're going to move a little bit faster now. But I wanted to show this contrast of Israel is actively doing things that are causing active harm to the Palestinian people. Children are being starved to death. Pregnant women are being starved to death. Men are being targeted, all this type of thing. Last year, everyone was ready to give Israel what it wanted, and they still said no. Things to think about. Before we move on, I want to quickly walk through this really great organization I found that I kind of like. I haven't looked into who's funding them yet, you know, sort of thing, but there's this new thing called the Grand Bargain Project. And this is from the Center for Collaborative Democracy, and it is about how voters can get Congress to function and meet their aspirations for a better life. And it advances basically 7 aspirations: greater economic prosperity and growth, schools that enable kids to reach their potential, effective and affordable healthcare, curbing the national debt, reliable, clean, and affordable energy, a fairer, simpler tax code, Congress organized to resolve our differences. How both parties have been crushing our aspirations. And it goes through economic mobility, education, healthcare, energy, taxes, national debt, all this sort of thing. And why both parties will keep thwarting our aspirations. And they have an app that you can use to motivate your elected representative to stand up for you. It says we've gathered over 300 ideas from diverse stakeholders invested in the 7 areas. We then distilled their ideas into 39 reforms that meet 5 criteria. Significantly enhance each American's life, boost efficiency to yield biggest bang for the buck, work well together, yield a package that nearly every citizen wants enough to accept the costs, motivate each lawmaker to act in the public's interest, which of course lawmakers never do because that's not who pays their bills. 83% of Americans, right, left, and center, agree on the grand bargain. A YouGov poll asked the following question: do you want Congress to make this grand bargain a priority? Democrats, 87%, Republicans, 83%, Independents, 83%. We are over 80 to 90% in literally almost every demographic except 76 to 97. In every ethnicity except Hispanic. And in every income bracket, sort of thing. I would encourage, we're not going to explore all this right now. I may do a dedicated video on this at some point, maybe try to get somebody from their organization on the podcast, but I would encourage you to go check this out, grandbargainproject.org. Go check it out, explore. I'm going to leave this tab open as a reminder to myself to try to get somebody from there on the Cameron Journal podcast. So, moving along quickly, speaking of lack of bipartisan agreement and making Americans' lives better, I found this really great video. Graham Plantner talking about what people are now calling the Epstein class of people who are running the world for their own benefit. And I just want to listen to, I think, some of this. Let's listen.
I think, it's important to note that, this is just, I think a lot of us have understood for a long time that there is a class of people that
Yeah, some of us
exist
have known this for 10
above
years.
accountability,
Yes.
that exists kind of above of even like
Yep.
the concept of the nation state.
Yes.
That there are people out there who have so much wealth and so much power that they live in a totally different world than we do. And what the Epstein Files are showing us is just how true that actually is, and also just how depraved that level of power and wealth can make people. And
for more on that, CameronJournal.com.
It's amazing that it is really kind of bringing in a lot of folks who in other issues don't agree with each other politically, but we are all beginning to realize, right, left, Republican, Democrat, down here in the real world, we actually are just there to be exploited by a small group of people who in some ways are just kind of running the world for their own benefit. And the Epstein Files show that in glaring fashion. And I think it's just the realization that we're all starting to wake up to this fact. And
if any one of you had read any of my work in the last decade, you would have not known this for a long time. In my original essay, How We the People Became We the Corporation, I have discussed this. This has been discussed over and over and over and over since at least the mid-2010s. This was the foundation of Occupy. I am amazed it has taken everyone 15 years to finally figure out what most of us have known a very long time. When you have high concentration of wealth and you have high concentration of power, and the Supreme Court linked those two together, thank you Buckley v. Vallejo and Citizens United, you end up with people who live in a completely different world that is not accountable in the same way ordinary people are. And by the way, you can see this at a small scale in your own town. But for me personally, I always laugh when the rest of the world catches up to something I've been saying for a long time. To be kind of like, yeah, I was talking about this in 2014. Where were y'all? And I think one of the interesting things about things like the Grand Bargain and this guy is this is now getting outside of the binary political thing. This is getting out of bipartisanship. We're leaving that frame behind. Now, if you're the billionaire class, or the Epstein class, as we're now calling it, this is the most frightening thing, because the whole point, as we now know, thanks to the Epstein Files, of identity politics was to stop a class war from breaking out. It's breaking out anyway. And this is the first indication of it. This is the first part of it. When guys who look like that are starting to say this out loud, that not guaranteed, but could be the beginning of a movement having a much greater conversation. Incidentally, even when I go to Trump people, especially moderate Trumpers, not really diehards, but people that are kind of like, yeah, Trump. And I start talking about this stuff, they're totally on board. That's probably half Trump's coalition. If you really get this sort of conversation going and make it less about each other and identities and much more about the people who are taking advantage of our society, that is a powerful political coalition that I guarantee you will overturn every single thing in this country. And if you want to see the proof of that, bounce back to the crime wave story. You know, when you invest in people and things, you get really wonderful results. They knew that in the Truman administration. And then we did that for 30 years. And ironically, the person who killed it was Nixon. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Many shades of many different presidents. I'm happy to see this, people finally figure this out and come around on it, you know, and finally figure out who the real responsible parties for all of this were the whole time. So, all right, we're still not way over time and not getting through all this stuff. Let's go through some of the latest Epstein file update stuff. And while I'm changing this graphic, don't forget, I am streaming the State of the Union tomorrow night, beginning at 8 o'clock for the speech at 9. Several big names. This is a Mario Nawfal. I don't love him, but Mario Nawfal post. Several big names have stepped down amid fallout from the massive Epstein docs release. Key resignations: Thomas Pritzker of Hyatt, Catherine Rummler of Goldman Sachs, Sultan Ahmed bin Sulayem, DP World CEO. Brad Karp from Paul Weiss Law Firm, Larry Summers, Harvard President, OpenAI Board of Directors, Peter Mendelsohn, British politician, Morgan McSweeney, Downing Street Chief of Staff, Tim Allen, Miroslav Lasak, Slovak National Security Advisor, Sarah Ferguson, former Duchess of York, stepped back from public roles and royal duties, especially because her ex-husband Andrew was arrested over the weekend. Jack Lang, Carolyn Lang, who are affiliated with some organizations in France, David Ross, Joanna Rubinstein, chair of Sweden for UNHCR. Is that the, I forget what they, not Human Rights Commission, something. UNHCR is health stuff. Most had ongoing contact with Epstein even after his 2008 conviction. Some are now under scrutiny or investigation. The list is growing fast. Who's next? Oh, it'll keep going. I'm not at all surprised. I mean, with Andrew being arrested and basically, being squeezed for cash, and Sarah Ferguson never being that great with money, I imagine she's basically couch surfing at this point. This is, the Europeans are not giving anyone any quarter. Anybody who is connected to Epstein in Europe is at minimum resigning, at maximum getting prosecuted. There's even, some people in Britain saying there's a tangential threat to the institution of the monarchy. And I would laugh at Andrew and say, it's quite impressive that you, by yourself, in your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein and getting your mother, beloved Queen Elizabeth II, to pay off these women, have managed to destroy a 1,000-year, almost continuous monarchy. You've managed, using your dick, to destroy a 1,000-year-old monarchy. Yeah, that's impressive. Henry VIII couldn't even have managed that. It's a quite impressive thing. There's a little bit more other fallout as well. One has to do with the story that kind of broke earlier this month, that the Epstein Files confirming Donald Trump, quote, blew the whistle on Epstein's disgusting behaviors in a 2006 phone call with the police, with the guy saying Trump was one of the very first people to call. That was a big story that never really got off the ground, never really went anywhere, for the simple fact that this is old, and this person walks through it more elegantly than I could. This is old information. The document's from 2019 and recounts events from 2006, but in the current context actually makes Trump look worse. What it says is that Trump spoke to the then police chief Michael Reiter after the investigation had gone public, because the investigation started in 2005. There's no official police report of this call, only the 2019 FD 302, in which Reiter recalls 2006 events. Trump said that, quote, everyone has known he's been doing this, unquote, which actually, and this is the part that's interesting, actually contradicts Trump's July 2019 testimony, where he said he had no idea about Epstein's crimes. More importantly, if Trump knew all about Epstein in 2006, why did he refuse to release the files, tell the country the Epstein case was unimportant, and to move on now? Either way, Trump did not blow the whistle on Epstein. Any contact came well after the investigation was underway and already public. And this is where we talk about narrative. The narrative that good guy Trump, and this narrative is not new either, but this whole narrative that good guy Trump knew what Epstein was up to and, threw him out of Mar-a-Lago and called the police and wasn't really involved and all this type of thing doesn't really hold water when you consider he's mentioned in the files tens of thousands of times for various and sundry things. The people around him at one time or another have tons of connections to Epstein affiliated people. It's its own milieu, especially when you see it on like a map. There's so many places now that have like mapped all the connections and are continuing to do so as more documents get processed. When you start seeing how expansive this network is, and then you see how much is clustered around Trump, that's kind of the frightening part. The reason why I say this is because I also, when I first saw this story, because that's the 9th of February, when I first saw this, I was kind of like, wait a minute, didn't Trump claim for a while that he had no idea about Epstein, like kind of didn't pretend who he was? And this person remembered the thing I couldn't remember, and that was the July 2019 testimony. And he said he had no idea about Epstein's crimes, but yet was the first person to call in, but only a year after the investigation started. this narrative didn't go anywhere. It didn't really get off the ground. It was tried, didn't get traction, and abandoned as uh as quick as it started. And and that, you know, it didn't really go anywhere. But I wanted to kind of remind people that when it comes to this subject, there's been a lot of inconsistencies. The reality is, people, not in this country, of course, but around the world, are getting arrested and investigated for far more tenuous connections. So far, let's take Trump to the one side. So far, after this, not a single U.S. person has been arrested so far. At least not that I've heard about. No one. No, and certainly no one of note. Especially after last week, we read that big list of everyone with political exposure in the report, and we read Bono, Cher, a smattering of Europeans, a smattering of British and Norwegian royals. There are Norwegian royals and all this type of thing. There's a whole list of Americans in there. No one has been arrested. No further investigations are taking place. No one has been handcuffed of note. I mean, there might have been other smaller people who have been arrested, whatever have you. But I have not seen any news on that in any place. So far, no one has gotten arrested. The rest of the world is taking action. We aren't. Why is that? One wonders. Although not really. Oh, this is this is fun. So, the first Epstein investigation started in 2005 after two girls at the Royal Palm Beach High School got into a fight, with one of them calling a prostitute and a hooker. And the journalist who originally broke that story, which was Julie K. Brown, in the Miami Herald in 2018, broke this whole story that it was literally two girls got in a fight, someone called the other one a prostitute and a hooker, and that caused the first Epstein investigation. Here's Joe Rogan finding about this in real time.
Did you hear about how this started in 2005? I think this is
no,
accurate.
but it's. I'm glad
What?
you're saying that because I'm.
This is crazy.
Two girls fighting.
So
High
it started
After a
between
fight.
a fight between two teenage girls at Royal Palm Beach High School in Florida. Here are the details of how the event triggered the investigation. Early 2005, two girls at Royal Palm Beach High School got into a fight during which one girl repeatedly called the other girl a prostitute or hooker. Following the fight, school administrations and parents investigated, searching one of the girls' purses and finding $300 in cash. The confession. The student initially claimed the money was from working at a fast food restaurant, but later revealed she had been paid for massages by a wealthy man, later identified as Jeffrey Epstein. This revelation led to a police investigation in March of 2005, when the stepmother of one of the girls reported the molestation to the Palm Beach police. Wow.
Wow, that's in 2005.
That was the first arrest.
And now listen to this. It says they identified the Royal Palm Beach High was identified as a focal point for recruitment, where, according to investigations, at least 15 students were lured into Epstein's Palm Beach home. Holy shit.
That's so crazy.
Now
That's
imagine
in
if those-
2005.
Imagine if those girls didn't get in that fight.
Yeah.
Imagine if that didn't
Wow.
happen.
And again, the local newspaper had this story 8 years ago. This has been around. This is not new. And the fact that, this is, this is a whole thing, and this is now finally coming out and finally being talked about in any meaningful way is quite shocking. We're late, is basically my point. We're very late on this whole thing. If you had stopped this man in 2008, you could have successfully stopped what is that? 11 years of harm and cruelty to real people. If things had been investigated way back then. Who was in office back then? Oh, right, Bush. We couldn't rely on them at all. This is a long ass video. It's 15 minutes, but very quickly we'll go through and speaking of just more Epstein fallout. The Israeli government installed and maintained security system at Epstein apartment. The Israeli government installed security equipment and controlled access to a Manhattan apartment building managed by convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, according to emails recently released by the Department of Justice. The equipment was installed beginning in early 2016 at 301 East 66th Street, where former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak stayed for extended periods. Emails show the security operation, Ehud's apartment, remained in place for at least 2 years, with officials from Israel's permanent mission to the United Nations corresponding regularly with Epstein's staff about security arrangements. The unit was owned by a company connected to Epstein's brother Mark Epstein, but was effectively controlled by Jeffrey Epstein. Units in the building were frequently loaned to Epstein's contacts and used to house underage models. He means victims. They mean victims. Drop site news has a link to the whole report, and this video is from Breaking Points, which is really cool. And so, yeah, it's, so it's, one of the things that's happening with the Epstein Files that I think is very important is the fact that the more and more you look at it, the more and more you realize this entire time Israel's been up to no good, which, considering what's happening in Gaza and the videos we played about that, and all the stuff in connection with Epstein and what was happening there, this leaves a very interesting what's going to happen with our relationship with Israel moving forward, as people are starting to figure out maybe not so much our friend as we thought. This is a quite sad thing. Yeah, it's a quite sad thing. It's a quite sad thing. And as I tell people, there's a Russia connection to Jeffrey Epstein, but the plane stops in Tel Aviv first. And this is a pile-on of more information, another brick in the wall that a lot was going on, and it was in concert with the Israeli government. So, oh yes, good. And now we're on to Georgia, I think, mostly. And we're way over time, but I'm going to keep going because all these tabs are short. So, there's multiple aspects to this. So let's start with kind of the breaking part of this, and that is the supporting affidavit for Trump's DOJ warrant to search Fulton County election records has been unsealed. Now, if you're not aware, last week on the show we covered the fact that the DOJ had executed a raid to secure ballot boxes from the 2020 election in Georgia, particularly in Fulton County. And so those ballots were seized and collected and taken somewhere, and so more information is now coming out. So it says that the duplicate ballots led to, quote, Donald Trump receiving approximately 10% more than his average in Fulton County, 40% instead of 30%. So if anything, the duplicated ballots from 2020 likely helped Trump, not Biden. Says here, a former investigator at the Secretary of State's office said that the complaint of duplicate ballots was investigated by tallying ballots by hand for the presidential race. No further investigation was conducted once the investigators learned that 40% of the duplicated ballots cast a vote for Trump. The investigators concluded it was not intentional misconduct. Additionally, stated he found similar cases of ballots being introduced during the recount to make the total numbers match those obtained during the original count in other counties throughout Georgia. It says here that he concluded what he observed could not be intentional but was not partisan. Explained that by adding the duplicate ballots, Donald Trump received approximately 10% more than his average in Fulton County, 40% instead of 30%. This indicated to the witness that the introduction of duplicate ballots was intended to make the recount numbers match more than to affect the outcome of the election. Such action would be an intentional tabulation of ballots in a false manner, in violation of U.S. federal code. So I wanted to start there, and most importantly because this is what happened in Arizona. So in Maricopa County in Arizona, Trump paid people to go down and convince a judge to let them recount all of Maricopa County in Arizona, and the judge let them do that, and they actually found more votes for Joe Biden. It appears that this not malicious, not partisan thing may have also happened in Fulton County. We have more information. Now, turning from that, what's this tab? Oh yeah, that's about tech and AI. We'll save all that. We'll save those tabs for next week, because that's more evergreen. We'll end on this. So, a new explosive report reveals that Elon Musk's PAC sent out pre-filled election ballots, which is highly illegal. Now, this is a story from the New Republic. Cameron, where's that story from the New Republic? Girl, I got you. I got you. We're already here. If Donald Trump's administration really wants to find evidence of foreign interference in Georgia's elections, they need to look no further than the president's old friend Elon Musk and his shady super PAC. Members of the Georgia State Elections Board voted Wednesday to issue a formal letter of reprimand to Musk's America PAC over the billionaire technocrat's illegal scheme to get Trump elected. Georgia, a key battleground state in 2024, was the target of aggressive campaigning by Trump's team. In October 2024, the Georgia Secretary of State's office launched an investigation after receiving numerous reports from residents across several counties saying they'd received partially pre-filled absentee ballot applications from Musk's America PAC, according to John Fervier, the state elections board chairman. There was evidence to suggest America PAC had violated a state law that prohibits any person or entity other than an authorized relative to send an elector an absentee ballot application pre-filled with the elector's required information, according to Janice Johnston, the SCB's vice chairman. America PAC had also failed to display in a conspicuous location that this was not an official government publication, was not provided by the government, and was not a ballot. The board swiftly voted to issue a letter of reprimand to America PAC. The letter comes weeks after Trump suggested that his National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard was spotted lurking around a federal raid at the election office in Fulton County, Georgia, because she was investigating foreign interference in elections. It should come as no surprise that the only evidence of meddling with the people's votes from Trump's own camp, the same thing happened in the 2020 election too. And that gets into the fake elector scandal, which we're not gonna get into at this juncture. I wanted to dash through this because this Georgia voting election thing is going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger story. And the reality is a lot of states have mandatory recounts if an election is too close. When it first happened, I said, I don't think there's any point in going after Georgia in 2020 because, one, the current governor ran the election in 2020. That's a thing. Also, you have mandatory recounts, and in 2020 it was a rather close election, not just for president, but for Senate seats that were up. So they recounted that election, I think, 3 times, sort of thing. And they sued at the time and were denied that they were in court for every single little thing. They had no standing. They had no reason. They had no real evidence or suspicion. I am open to new evidence. I am open to new information coming out. I am open that something could have gone wrong. Election integrity is very, very important. It's very important that we believe in our democratic process. I just don't think there's there right now. But I do think there is certainly a narrative being pushed that there's something there when there probably isn't as much as one would think there would be. So, on that note, I'm going to end for tonight. We're way over time. Thank you so much for watching the Cameron Journal Newshour. I really appreciate it. My name is Cameron Cowan. Please visit me online at Cameron Cowan on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, at Cameron Journal on TikTok and Blue Sky. Make sure to head over and subscribe to the newsletter, cameronjournal.substack.com or cameronjournal.com/newsletter. And join me tomorrow night for the State of the Union with President Trump. I will be starting the stream at 8 o'clock. And bring a snack, bring food, bring your kids, come hang out. We're going to have fun. It's going to be a long one. So I'll see you guys tomorrow night for State of the Union. And I'll see you for this show next week, every Monday at 7 Eastern. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. Good night.